So we have a lot of new people here today. I think Spark is sending some people our way.
Oh, it's a Spark meeting.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So you have a lot of people who don't who haven't taken many advanced classes yet. So
Then
you'll
this is
have
perfect.
a lot of entry level interest tonight. Plus some people who do know a lot about motion graphics and stuff and are looking to get out there and start their internships or jobs. So Kyle is a graduate of Ithaca College, 2020. Is that right?
Correct.
Woohoo. Okay.
Year of the Rona.
The fun year.
That really fun year that everyone remembers.
So yeah, he was my student and then I passed him on to Brad.
Which I very was glad to welcome Kyle. He worked with me in the mocap lab at IC in health science basement. Pretty cool. But we are doing some work on his thesis in Maya. But Kyle has, since graduating, been working as a motion graphics artist in New York, working for Verizon Networks. And tonight he's going to be talking about some of his journey post-graduation, his job, and a little bit of his current workflow using Figma and After Effects.
Yes, all that sounds good. All right.
I also want to mention that Verizon has employed a lot of the people from this group. So it's usually, we have 2 people there right now, just 2?
3, including me.
3? Okay. And then they get pulled off into other companies and then people from here take their place. So Kyle's going to be a really good person if you're interested in the kind of work he's going to show you, to keep in touch with him.
Yeah. I can confirm I've seen it happen. Multiple Ithaca grads have gone through the job that I currently have and are now working on some pretty cool stuff. I think David is kind of working at Code and Theory. He was here. I actually not took his place, but as I joined the team, he left a few months after. Calvin O'Connor, I basically took his place. He left and is doing a lot of animation work now. Trying to think who else.
Avery.
Avery. Who's doing some crazy stuff every now and then. Like I'll see some of the work he's been doing. It blows my mind. I can't even comprehend some of the stuff he's working on. But yeah, anyway, that's enough about people that aren't me. This is me. Like Shana said, I graduated in 2020. And I think that summer, my current boss, Joe, reached out. He actually said that he was looking for a junior animator and got my name through Brad. So thank you, Brad. I started as a junior animator. I mean, I still technically am a junior animator because I'm not doing a lot of the big design work. With that being said, that doesn't mean that my responsibilities haven't necessarily increased in my time at Verizon. At first, I was doing a lot of repetitive work, not bad work, just repetitive, just pumping out social animations for Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. Just like stuff that needs to be easily replicated. And I think the turnaround time for final files would literally be like a day. Like we get tagged on a project, be like, hey, can you work on, like, who's available to work on this? Then someone will say like, hey, I'm free, I have some time. And then they'll get it out in a day. And then it's like super basic stuff. It's like a promo, some text appears on screen. Maybe you'll have the device do a little fun little bounce animation, but then you'll move on 5 to 10 seconds. That's how I started. And now I'm doing a lot more, not experimental, because it still has to maintain, like work for a big company like Verizon. You have to be able to work within their very specific brand guidelines. But we're working on a lot of new stuff within the stores in terms of like getting content and it's hard to say advertisements because it's like within the store, but it's like, a lot of user interactivity stuff, trying to engage customers while they're physically present in the store, which has been very fun because it's started in, I think this newest round of like interactive experience stuff started in January. I've more or less been on the team for that since it started this year. And I've seen it go through a lot of different changes. But yeah, I guess before I go into the demo of like my workflow, does anyone have any questions about what it's like to work for a big company like Verizon?
Well, what's your like current week structured like as far as like remote, on site, like, and do you, I mean, I know you started like in COVID, but have you seen that change, and what do you kind of feel that was the change, you know, when you got on?
Yeah, no, like Brad said, I started in COVID. So it was very interesting meeting the team that I work with, that like, they're all really cool people, but for the first year of working with them, I never saw them in person. I think it was like 6 months in, we all just independently decided to go and meet for drinks for the first time, just so we could physically see what we looked like in person. But that's just my team. Like, there's a lot of people I work with that aren't on my team that are like producers, managers, designers and stuff that don't report to my boss, they report to a different boss. It's just, we obviously have to work on the projects together, that I didn't see until we went into office. And then it was very weird because they kept saying we're going into office soon. I think right around the new year in 2021 there were talks of like, okay, we're going to start going into office by May. And then May came and went, and there wasn't really any word. And we were like, okay, we're going to office. And there's like, okay, no, we're going into office in October. And then October came and went, and there wasn't any word again. They're saying, okay, we're going to start going in January. And then that was a little more serious, because that's when the talks actually started happening of like logistically, like they were asking us like, hey, what days would you want to go? And my boss was being like, okay, we're looking like we're going to have to go in at least 2 days a week. What days work best for everyone? What's everything doing? What's everyone availability? You have a job, so you should be available all 5 days of the work week. But in terms of like what days people would prefer. And then, yeah, the February of this year, it was like, okay, hard start date. We're going to start going in office. I think they made the announcement in February, and then we didn't start going in until April. So it was like February, we had a big company meeting, and they were like, okay, we're going into office. Here's the official start date. I think it was actually, I don't know, it was the first week of April. But we went in for like a little test run ahead of time, just to like work out the kinks. And it was kind of a day where my boss was like, okay, if you're late to work, it's okay. Cause like, you got to figure out the train schedules. You got to figure, because obviously like, I think at that point, half the team, like, again, cause it's kind of a revolving door building. Half the team at that point had been hired during COVID and had worked entirely remotely. So it was mostly for us to figure out like, okay, how do we get into office? What's the best time to leave? What's our train schedules looking like? And my boss has always been very, very lenient about going into office. And it's still really weird because they decided 2 days a week. It was going to be Tuesdays and Wednesdays. That was going to be our days. And then even going into the office those days, because it wasn't a company-wide mandate, it was department, like what every department decided the days, we'd go in on Tuesdays and the office would be a ghost town. And in some ways that's cool, because then you just get to sit down and work and no one bothers you. But in other ways it's kind of weird, because it's this really nice office. It's huge, but it's completely empty of just like anyone except your team, our team, which is even weirder because our motion graphics room is kind of separated from the rest of the offices, or the office, because the office is very open. There's no cubicles or anything. It's very like just desks with computers or places to log in. But our room is, because we need a dedicated space and a space to keep all our animations and be connected to our servers. We have a specific room that is designated just us. Because I think with the new hybrid model stuff, rather than assign people offices, you essentially come into the office, check in, and just first come, first serve, grab a desk near your coworkers. But because of the nature of our job, where we are because a lot of the designers, I'm pretty sure, work off their MacBooks, so they are very mobile, and that's good for them because obviously they're in a lot of meetings, they're in a lot of pitch stuff where they have to be able to show someone at a moment's notice what they've been working on. But with the stuff we're working on is a little more ironically stationary, because we need to have really high-end computers for rendering times, because otherwise we're going to be like, even with some of the stuff we make, it's not like we're making crazy long animations or anything, but we still have to dedicate a decent amount of time for renders. And also we need server access because we could not, we need, sometimes it's requested we use footage and like live action footage and stuff. And we have to use obviously the raw stuff. We can't use MOV or MP4 codecs. We need to use the stuff directly off the camera, off the shoot. So we have to have connections to the servers where those are stored and everything. So it's very important that we have our workspace that doesn't get touched, which is very nice.
When you're remote, do you have like a secure like login to the server where you like have access to the stuff?
So for when we're remote, we actually have started using Jump Desktop. Mm-hmm. So we're just doing screen sharing. I mean, if anyone knows Jump Desktop, it's a very, very cool program where you essentially do screen sharing and you can then control any computer that also is logged in. So they have it for our whole team, but it's very cool. It's very good. I think for a program like this, you'd expect there'd be a lot of lag, and there is, depending on how your internet is. But like if you've got a steady internet connection, it's barely any lag. It's barely any issues. Sometimes there's a little, like you'll have a hiccup where the image quality drops, but it's only for like a second. Yeah. And the cool thing is my personal desktop at home is a Windows computer, but the office computers are MacBooks, but Jump Desktop is cross-compatible. So the key bindings, the keyboard shortcuts took a little bit of getting used to because obviously it's not a one-to-one thing, but like I can very easily use my Windows keyboard on my MacBook Pro or my Mac Air Mac. iMac? It's the iMac in the office. It's the big one.
Yeah. Nice.
Very, very cool. It also helps that then I don't have to worry about getting a secure connection to my personal computer, because a thing about working for a company like Verizon is they very much value their security, which is nice because, you know, you don't want to lose data or anything or be risk to hackers, but it's not nice if you have a computer job, if you have a job that requires a lot out of your PC, out of your RAM, out of your GPU usage, and like 40 to 50% of your computer is dedicated to just background security programs, it really starts to eat at your render times. So because the what's it called? It's a closed server in the office for all the work computers. So obviously there's the internet connection, but the server itself is internal only. So we don't have to worry about setting up a wireless connection for our personal desktops and then getting everything wired. It's just, okay, we can see the screen. Nice. And then it's even better because if I'm not home and I need to do something, I can work off my laptop, same functionality, because I just need to have access to the computer screen.
That's nice. Excellent. Thanks.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Very cool thing that came out of working the hybrid model. All right. So that's more like the grander scheme of what my work looks like in terms of like how I work, but I can actually go and show the actual workflow of like what it typically would look like. So obviously I use a lot of After Effects. That's my bread and butter. That's what we use to make most of the stuff. But we don't do the designs ourselves. We are just the animators. We receive boards to motion out. So designers will hand us boards. We used to use a bunch of different programs. We used Illustrator, which worked pretty nice. We used XD, which worked not very nice. And we used Sketch, which works better than XD. That's all I can say about it. But recently we started using a completely free program called Figma, which I if you've never heard of Figma, I highly recommend you look into it. It's a very good, it's certainly taken up speed in the past few months, in the past year or so, I think. It recently got bought out by Adobe, so maybe get in while it's not ruined, but it's free. I'm pretty sure it's open source, so there's a ton of cool like plugins and development stuff, development tools for it. And it's a very, very powerful program. And I did download the app just because I would like to have everything on my computer, but you can do everything. You can do everything directly through like your web browser, which is very cool. And it has the same functionalities. The app is actually just the same as it appears in the web browser. I just like having it. And I saw someone ask, yeah, I'm pretty sure the purchase did go through for Adobe. They just bought Figma for probably more money than it's worth because it's just like a very small program that just kind of got very popular recently. That being said, if you just use Figma in a vacuum, you would never know that Adobe bought it. I'm sure you'll start seeing branding and you'll start seeing support in the Adobe Cloud coming, which unfortunately means it's probably going to get worse for a little bit. It's going to get less optimized as they try and bring it into the full Adobe Creative Suite. But hopefully it stays free, which I think it will. I don't think they would do something like that. They'll probably do like a premium version, but even if just having basic access to some of the tools that Figma has is very, very cool. So I'll show really quick what Figma looks like. So here's what Figma looks like. Gotta move some stuff out of the way. Yeah, so it's very, very cool. This is just something I mocked up myself because as I was saying before the meeting started, I was going to show off some of the boards that I received from some designers, but because we started using Figma relatively recently, most, if not all of the boards I received are ongoing projects, which means I would just bashing through that NDA that I signed when I started working and doing some very illegal stuff that would get me sued for more money than I will ever make. So this is more or less what I would get if I was working on a board. So it's usually something simple because again, we're doing ads, we're doing stuff that's supposed to be, what's the word? Like, you know, eye-catching, get user interactivity, get people engaged on the latest tech. In here, I did the new Game Sphere. But yeah, just instead of the Game Sphere, imagine an iPhone was here or an Xbox, because I think Verizon just recently started selling Xboxes and PlayStations and stuff. And it's kind of the same thing. Verizon has its own special font, special colors and everything that like makes it brand compliant. And there's very specific restrictions and design protocols in terms of what is and isn't on brand. But this is pretty close to what you see. You'll have your start, your introduction, some sort of catchy tagline, and then the actual promo itself. And typically this is where most of the information of the content is going to be. So it used to be, if I received boards for, let's say, Sketch or Illustrator, the easiest way for me was to either export individual elements. If it was something complicated like these circles here, it would be good to just export them as, I can directly export them as PNGs, or I could export the whole frame as a PNG. So let me see if I can get to see my awful organization. So you get to export the whole frame as a PNG. You can preview it, just make sure everything's in there. And then I'd go into After Effects, which is After Effects showing up. Just want to make sure. Looks good. Okay, cool. Yeah, so you go into After Effects, then you could easily just bring that in. And then you just bring in the whole thing, bring it into your comp. You have it there. And now you have what the board looks like. Because if you try bringing things in directly from, let's say, Sketch, which is, if you don't know what Sketch is, it's a very similar program to Figma or Illustrator. Sometimes you could bring things like files directly in, and they can sometimes work, but a lot of times I've noticed that things either get off-centered or like the spacing and the words are wrong, and stuff, even smaller stuff that like would make it very incorrect, but you wouldn't necessarily notice. So it was always good to just have like a basic like overlay of like, okay, this is how it appears in the boards I received, so I can go and make sure, and then I can do everything manually, so I can make the text and I can do introducing. Change all the text color and sizing and everything, and then I could space that. So, you know, it's nothing too complicated, pretty easy, but it does get a bit tedious, and also just like the amount of time spent setting up each frame, because again, this is just one frame, could eat up a lot of time that could be better spent actually animating the project. So Figma, again, because it's open source, has a lot of good development tools, is really cool. So here's a completely free plugin that we recently started using called AEUX. So I open it up after I have everything installed and everything. I go to development, AEUX, and this tiny little guy shows up. So cool thing about this program is you can select the frame, which again is very, very easily labeled. Every frame is like separate, the artboard. If you ever used this Illustrator, it's just the artboards. So you can select the whole frame, and then you say send selection to After Effects or to AE. It'll open up After Effects and then just drop everything in, which is very cool. And the cool thing about this is it brings everything in the correct, I guess I'm gonna delete that. It brings everything with the correct positional values. So all of these little guys down here mirror how they appear in the boards, which is very cool because then I don't have to spend time hand placing each individual little bubble to where it appears on the boards, which is very cool. But it also, I have a setting applied where it automatically grouped everything together as a pre-comp. And another thing that I really like about AEUX is that, okay, well, this is cool that I have all these bubbles put together, but unfortunately, if I move it, moves the whole thing. I don't necessarily want that because it would look cooler if all the bubbles moved individually. So if I go to the AEUX panel within After Effects, I can unprecomp it and it will separate every single bubble onto its own layer. Now the pre-comp does still exist, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so the pre-comp does still exist right here. But actually it's a different pre-comp. The pre-comp should still exist, but it has now separated everything onto its own layer, so I can individually manipulate each one of these. And the even cooler part about this is that in Figma, obviously, the designers can have a lot of fun with some of the designs, and all of these bubbles here, I forgot what I use. I think they're difference. That's the way it applies. No, pass through. No, here we go. Yeah, sorry, they're lightened. They're lightened. The screen, I forgot what the layer is lightened. So obviously when it overlaps, it has the cool color shifting effect thing. I don't need to redo that in After Effects. It's already all of the, anything it can bring into After Effects will be brought in. All this, any settings. It works particularly well on shapes and images. Those I've never seen an issue with. And I've never had any problems with. Oh, and the cool thing again is that after you unprecomp it, you make all the adjustments, just select everything. And just pre-comp it right back. And now you have everything put right back together as a whole thing. Now that's not rasterized, but you get my point, where it's everything's now back how it looking how it should. But I don't want to do that because I want to be able to animate each one of these individually. Again, shapes, images usually work perfectly. I've never ever had to adjust the images of a shape or a picture because those are brought in perfectly. Text is a different story. So I think this is actually a perfect example. If we go to the more complicated frame, which is this last one here, send selection to AE, it'll bring everything in. This is just in case there are any images. It looks for a folder to dump any actual images that aren't just shape layers, because obviously shape layers are not images, they're vectors that you just generate within the program. But the main content here, the game sphere itself, is a PNG that I just shamelessly ripped off the internet. So in order to bring it into After Effects, it needs to import the image. So you can create a folder to put that image in, and then it will just bring in the PNG itself. So this is a perfect example of what I was saying before. The shapes all have the correct value. These are all pre-comp together. So I can unprecomp this. Again, it takes a second, but here's now every single one of these circles on its own layer that I can now individually manipulate. But if you look, the text is a bit janky. Why is that? So if we go in here, it's all bundled up together. So a good thing first is now we can go in here. Remember when I was talking about before, where it's good to have a reference image of how it appears in the boards you receive, just to make sure there's no issues. Obviously, the compressed sandwich text is a very glaring issue, but there could be potentially issues that are less apparent that you want to make sure you're on top of. AUX has a very nice feature where you can export reference image on top of it. So if I were to go back to After Effects, hold on. If I go back to After Effects, go back to demo, do the whole thing, bring everything back in with the export reference image selected, send selection to AE, it will open up everything, select folder. And now I go back into AE. Now, if you look, the top layer is the reference image. So the top layer, if we solo that, we can see is how it appears on the boards. It's the exported JPEG of the full frame from Figma, and automatically brought to 50% opacity so you can see through it, and automatically as a guide layer. So if you hit render without hiding that layer, it's not going to show up in your render. This plugin is very nice, and this workflow is very nice because a lot of the menial stuff that is surprisingly very easy to miss when you're just kind of going through the motions is done for you, which is why I absolutely love this plugin. And also just like some of the stuff in here, like just a sweeping toggle guide layer visibility button, so all guide layers can be turned on or off. Pre-comp and un-pre-comp doesn't just apply to stuff brought into Figma. That is a button that is applicable to literally any pre-comp, including things you have built within After Effects. And again, like the pre-comp button, that's nothing great. Like you can just right-click pre-comp here, but the fact that it's just one less step that you can bring everything in. Because if I do this, oops, I hit that. If I do this, all these, I just want to pre-comp all of these. Everything's pre-comped. But I don't want to do that because I want to make sure everything's separate. So now going into the troubleshooting part, because again, it's not perfect because Figma is not After Effects, After Effects is not Figma, there's going to be some issues. So if we look at Figma, we can look at some of the things. I think the first thing you'll see is that I don't have the Cairo text installed on After Effects. I'm not going to do that right now, but I can probably find something similar to kind of show you what it's, what it's supposed to look like. So big thing here, you can see all of these settings are auto, like this is the cap height, I believe. A lot of these settings I didn't mess with because Figma does a lot of the work for you. That being said, After Effects does not do a lot of the work for you. So if we go in here and look at this text layer, this text sandwich, go to character, see metric, see this is brought to 0. Let's see. Oh, see, here we go. For some reason, whatever reason After Effects is a glorious logic decided that the spacing between the lines was 3.9 when it's 100 size font. That's always a consistent issue I've noticed. So instead we can just bring it up a bit. So now I bring it to 100 and it looks much better. So now we can go back to seeing the rest, make everything 100. And now it's doing the effect again. Now it's back to normal. And if we go back into demo, perfect. So again, it's not perfect. You're going to have some issues, but a good thing is that Figma and AUX, this plugin, gives you the tools to very easily correct any issues that happens in the transfer. Because it's not one-to-one. It's two completely different programs. So this text is also a little off. Yeah.
So and with working remotely and you have like access remote like to basically the desktop in the office, you don't have issues with font substitutions though, because you have access to all the fonts that we're using, right?
Yes, that's a very good thing about working with, because I'm working off my personal desktop right now just for ease of demonstration. But when I'm actually working, since I'm working off of the iMac, even through screen share, all of the fonts are installed, and that is a company-wide, like you have to use these fonts with these sizes. So I never have to worry about any mismatched font. That was an issue with some of the older workflows, because I can go off about the issues I have with some of the old ways we used to do things, specifically with Sketch, especially because a lot of the font, I think, was a new, I think like right before I started working, the font was changed to what we use right now. So a lot of the older designers that use Sketch would use that old font, which is very, very minutely different. Like I think the kerning on some letters was just like ever so slightly different, and the spacing of certain things was so slightly different, but it was obviously a new font. And if there's anything about computers, is that if you change very minute things, it doesn't know how to react. So even though you'd have the new font and the old font installed that are very, very similar, when you spring stuff over, or when you try to edit stuff, it would be like, oh, you don't have this font. So it would just revert to the default like Arial font, which looks atrocious in these boards. And then it would also throw off all of these beautiful designs you've got here, where things look so lovely. Let me just see if I can do this. So unprecomp, because I want to do this. Gotta find what the right thing, because again, I can unprecomp it rather than go in and try to eyeball it and go back and forth, because the nice unprecomp thing, I can just adjust this. Let me bring it, call that close enough. Again, no one's going to see this, so I don't have to worry about making it perfect. Then I go back, pre-comp, and now it's perfect, and it's all one unit again.
How old is the plugin? Because I imagine this is a pretty common issue with text coming from Figma. That seems like they'd probably be addressing it in future iterations of the plugin.
I know the plugin, because again, we started using Figma pretty recently. The plugin definitely came out this year. That is for sure. It's still like version 1 point something. Actually, I don't think it's even 1.0. I think you can actually see in Figma which version it is. Yeah, not even 1.0. It's version 0.81b.
So it's still beta.
It's still very much in beta. But I think the fact that it's in beta and it's still more reliable than pretty much any workflow I've worked with. Because again, I've been at Verizon for 2 years, and we have had some pretty frustrating workflows that we just more or less had to suck up and just be like, okay, gotta export everything individually so I can manipulate it individually, because if I try and bring this whole batch in, I'm not gonna be able to separate things, and it's gonna cause issues down the line. So with a lot of time to dedicate it to just setting up the project, whereas now I can just bring everything in, and then everything that needs to be grouped, I can keep grouped. But if it's something like this, I can just unprecomp it and move things. Ooh, that's not the right thing I meant to grab. I can move things individually and animate things very nicely. Yeah, the only thing I'd say I have an issue with, and even then it's very minor, is text. Text clearly needs some working out, especially if like you have a designer that has gone in and done a lot of funky stuff with the text.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that you're getting clean vectors and position and pivots is huge. I mean, just to get that cleanly over in blending modes too. I think that's pretty nice and worth it alone. But it's good to know about the text. And you can avoid that too.
Yeah. It's and again, the text is very minor because we're used to we used to just recreate the text in After Effects on our own anyway. Like sometimes I wouldn't even like check the text. I wouldn't try to bring in the text. I would just go into Sketch or Illustrator, check what the font size is, and then just recreate it in After Effects because that was easier. But now this is significant. This is significantly faster than that. Yeah. And again, Figma is free. This plugin is free. It is currently being updated. It's not even it's still in beta, but it's a very, very good beta. It's not like that Steam early access stuff.
It's promising, certainly.
It's very promising. But yeah, this is basically my workflow, because from here is where I would do the actual animating. And then if I wanted to show you guys this rest of this meeting would just be me just showing you the Verizon guidelines.
So they have like style guidelines on animation. Okay, cool.
Yes.
So could you talk about that a little bit? Like what you have to like conform to, and
I know off the top of my head that's how much it's been hammered in. When I first was on board, they had a big design doc that was like, here's what the Verizon brand is. Here's all of the fonts we use. Here's when to use those fonts. That's not for me. That's obviously more for the designers when they're making the campaigns. But even then, having that knowledge is good to know, because sometimes you'll see designers make questionable decisions, and you'll just be like, hey, just want to raise a flag before this goes live and it's actually incorrect. But yeah, no, it is a custom Verizon font that they had developed called VNG which stands for Verizon, and then it's like New Gaussian. I don't know what the actual thing is, like some weird German word, with all the weird font names. It's a sans serif font. It's a very clean looking font. Most of the time we'll be using bold. There's bold, extra bold, regular, and light. The headlines are bold, and they are 150 point text. The subheads, which is the little disclaimers underneath the headline, is regular weight with, I believe it's 50 font pixels. And then there's like a mini headline in between that for like maybe the screen, maybe you need to get a lot of content or a lot of information in there. It's 125 with bolded weight. And then there's super headlines, which is 250. And that's like for the, wow, this is crazy, this is brand new, and it gets used maybe like twice a year.
Yes.
And then the legal is like, oh, that's the thing. That's another thing. The legal is actually a separate font because it's super small. I believe it's 14 size, and it's regular. So it's like really hard to see. So it's still sans serif, but the spacing between the letters is wider, and it's harder edges to make it so it's not as smooth, it's not as rounded. So it's very just like print. It's legal. It's not exactly crazy stuff. And then even then there's this, and then for the actual, that's for the design, but for the actual motion stuff, which is obviously what I'll be doing, that's a little more just like whatever works, because obviously not every motion design guideline is going to work for every campaign. So like usually like the rule of thumb is you'll have 82% easing with baseline reveals. Verizon loves their baselines, where it's just like, just comes right up from the baseline, very quick, clean, looks good. 82% is like the magic number, where it's just like not too fast, not too slow. But that, again, that is very much just like see what works. Like that's where you actually have to use your knowledge as an animator of like, okay, is this working? Is this too fast? Is this too slow? But it still has to be very on brand. And then what's even weirder is when you get into dealing with other companies that aren't Verizon and how they like to be represented. I'm specifically going to name, actually, I'm not going to name any names, but a certain fruit-based tech company is very fun to work with because they don't like playing nice, and they like to give us a lot of assets, but then say, you cannot touch them. You cannot do anything to make them look better. We have carefully curated these very specific assets, and you can't do anything with them. So we have these really fun, for all their competitors, we have these fun animations where we have like the devices come in, or they come from the bottom of the screen, or they like settle into this nice lockup with all their extra gadgets and stuff. But then this special fruit-based company decides like, no, you have to use this still image, and you cannot touch it, you cannot alter it, you cannot move it. If we see any movement, we will disapprove this, because every single thing you make that has our stuff in it has to be approved by us. And also we won't respond till 4 a.m.
But I mean, that's good experience. So working with different third parties and getting their design standards like percolating through to what you have to do. So I was going to ask that next, is like, what sort of back and forth do you have with your supervisors and those beyond that for notes and revisions and stuff? Like, how does that work?
That's very project to project, because again, with the fruit company, that's very, I never talk to it. That is like legal, that is the project managers. They are going to send everything to them, and then they're going to come back to me and tell me what they said, or tell the designers or tell the creative director what they said. And then we'll have a meeting like, okay, how do we make this work then? In fact, actually a project I've been working on recently, we had to do a whole revamp of one of the promos, because they didn't like the way they were being represented in the promo. So now it's like, okay, we have to not scrap everything, but we have to now think of something else to satisfy these new guidelines or these new needs that need to be met. It's very much a balancing act of like, okay, well, we want to make a fun, flashy animation, but at the end of the day, this is still a business. This is still like, this is a job. We're not making like high class art here. We are making advertisements, which isn't bad. It's a very large part of the industry. And obviously there are like brands have to keep their image looking consistent, because I think, and it makes sense, because if you don't have a grip on your image, it becomes hard to identify what is official, what is good, and it's messy. So some brands are more lenient with working with us than others. But it is a lot of trying to balance, okay, we have to not only make it look good, just baseline, it has to look good, obviously, but also we have to make it brand compliant for our brand, for Verizon, but also it needs to be brand compliant with any partners that we're working with. It's a very interesting process. Seeing behind the scenes, a lot of the decisions, a lot of the executive decisions, obviously I'm not going to make. A lot of design decisions are going to come from the designers themselves, but in terms of like the motion and everything, that's not like it's not reviewed, but it's very much just like, okay, you are the motion animator, make it move. Which is sometimes good, because sometimes I'll receive boards where there's a lot of wiggle room, where it's just like, okay, there's not really a restriction on how this is supposed to move, so I can do whatever with it. But sometimes that's not as good, because okay, I can do whatever with it, but it also is sometimes good to have like a direction to go in, because otherwise it kind of comes back to that problem of just like, well, if there's no clear vision, then it's just going to kind of be messy and all over the place. But again, it's all about that balance.
Kyle, do you have any links to share?
Links of like Verizon work?
Either the work
plugins
or the plugins.
Oh, okay. Well, I can show the official. Well, first I'll do Figma, which is
plug it in the chat.
Yeah. Here, let me see. Sorry, I don't want to out myself of my music preferences. Here, I'll put Figma in the chat, because this, again, you can download the app. It is nice, but it literally has no extra functionality in the actual app itself. It is just how it appears in the web browser. Let's see. Let's see the Figma. Yeah. Products, Figma design. Here we go. So I will send the actual Figma link in. Can I stop my screen share? Do you all want to look at this logo?
No, yeah, we're good.
Okay, because then I can actually find the chat. Okay, here we go. So that's Figma. Again, you can just create an account, start working. It's very, very nice. And then now I can find AUX, Figma, AUX.io. I'll send this in to everyone. This is the After Effects plugin that I use for my workflow. It connects, it has 3 versions that all, like you download one zip file. It has a plugin for Figma, which you can use in the browser. It is actually really cool that it can do that. But again, I prefer to have the app downloaded. It has the After Effects program, which then you need to download this plugin off of AE Scripts. ZXP installer, it's for installing specific types of plugins. This is just good to have. It's a plugin manager for After Effects. It's very good to have. So AE Scripts, this is, you need to have this for, it is actually, you know what, Ryan, it's very similar to Overlord. It is very, very similar to Overlord. But yeah, ZXP is not just good for AUX, it's a good plugin manager for anything that is compatible with it. And I think that's all you need. And then, yeah, going back to AUX, it has After Effects, Figma, and also a Sketch version. If you've ever used Sketch, it's similar to Figma, except it's not web-based, it's not browser-based, it's an actual app. It's similar to XD, which is just like a bad version of Sketch, which that Adobe makes. Don't use XD, it's not great. Or use XD if that's all you have access to, but it's not great. I'm trying to think. And then I guess I can send this link. of just the overall website, because I remember when I was a wee freshman in college, I tried to do everything After Effects myself. In fact, I tried to do everything in most of the programs I had myself, because I was like, okay, if I don't understand how to do it myself, I'm not gonna be able to like improve or whatever, which is like true to an extent. But I think I neglected a large part of the After Effects or Adobe Suites or just like creative program sphere, which is plugins. So I'm going to send the link to AE scripts plus AE plugins. Actually, I think AE plugins will do something. No, here we go. So this website, you can just browse it. There's some free stuff. I will say most of it is not free, but there are a lot of really good plugins. Because the thing is, I feel like people, when they hear plugins, they think like, oh, it completely changes the way After Effects or Premiere or Photoshop or Illustrator work. It adds additional functionality. Like there's a really popular plugin for After Effects called Newton, which is a 2D physics engine just built that you can bring into After Effects. So it's like, yeah, it does do this whole crazy new aspect of After Effects that is just straight up not in the base version. But a lot of plugins, in fact, something I'm looking into myself, I'm not going to say get this because I haven't purchased it myself, but again, I'm thinking about getting it myself, is this plugin called Reach. It's called the AE Essentials Kit. It basically automates a lot of stuff and allows you to have a lot of presets and everything. A lot of the plugin world is not crazy, flashy, new crazy things to do. It is a lot of automation. It is a lot of taking time out of just setting up a project and tedious stuff that you need to do all the time, and just allowing you to focus more on the actual animating or production side of things. If you ever find yourself, I was thinking about this, if you ever find yourself repeating the same task in whatever program you're in, whether it's After Effects, Premiere, Illustrator, Toon Boom, anything, any program that can do so okay, all right, well, sorry, Chris, I just saw your message and that threw me off because hold on.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
No, you're good, because what is it? Joysticks and sliders. Here it is. Here we go. This is a very popular one. Again, a little on the pricier side, but very, very popular. Joysticks and sliders allows you to rig stuff with literal joysticks and sliders within After Effects. So rather than individually keyframe animate an object itself, you can rig it to a null joystick that you've built out, or that I think it auto generates actually in After Effects, and then you can move stuff around. It's very, very cool.
There's also Duik also has some built-in easing stuff for free too. There's a number of, like, if you just look up easing on AE scripts, there are a number of cool automation plugins.
There are a lot, and this thing, I'm sending in kind of like premium plugins. There's a lot of good plugins that you do not have to pay for. These are just like, if you ever have the ability, the extra funds, and you really want to just like have a little bit easier time with After Effects in your workflow, these are good things to have. Duik is free. Joysticks and sliders. Joysticks and sliders, like, I guess just like the streamlined version. It's very, very nice. But yeah, after, like, I sent in these recommendations. I can offer my opinions and everything, but I highly recommend looking into plugins. If you find yourself repeating the same tasks in a program, there probably exists a plugin for it. There's plugins for a lot of stuff that you wouldn't think of. A lot of it is management, and again, there's a lot of good free stuff. And even then, most stuff, I will also say most stuff also allows trials, so you can like test it out, see if it still works, and works for you, and before you actually commit to buying, like spending money, because obviously, you don't want to spend money if you don't have to, which is why it's also important to look for free alternatives of everything.
But like you mentioned earlier, any sort of repetitive tasks that you're finding especially on similar jobs where you're dumping hours into repeated clicks. Think about what a $50 plugin really represents. You know, if it's going to save you hours of time, it's probably worth it.
There's a lot of good stuff on the internet.
Kyle, do you have anything, maybe if nothing's out that you worked on, but just examples of what Verizon puts out?
Yes, I can probably just show the Verizon website. We do a lot of .com work.
And then I think we're close to the end. So I think if anyone has any questions about either working at Verizon, how to work at Verizon, how to contact Kyle for jobs in the future.
I'm not the hiring manager.
No, I know.
Yeah. I can definitely put your name.
Correct. You know, keep that real, you know.
And then any other questions you have about getting into this industry and what you should do while you're in school to get there.
And Kyle, could you put your email, Addie, your current one, in the chat thing?
Yes, here we go. Here's what we do. I almost put my Ithaca.
Yeah, don't do that.
I still have access
Not as good anymore. That's good. You can set up for like LinkedIn, Autodesk, anything you need. Education.
So that's my email. And then I'll also put my Instagram because I'm on that pretty regularly. Let's see. That's my Instagram handle. I'm on there a lot. So you can
follow Kyle on Instagram. He puts up cool stuff.
Is this? Let's see if I can find.
I was just speaking with him on Saturday how he's going to be doing more of that, right?
I'm trying to.
Yeah.
A lot more. I'm trying to do more stuff. The thing is, right now we're about to enter the holiday season, which is undeniably the busiest time of year for us. I think actually we already are expecting to do some weekend work, which, you know, is a little annoying, but at the same time, overtime is very nice. That's one good thing about being contract, is that salary work. If you're a salary worker, you don't get any extra money for working extra hours. But if you are a contract worker, you make a lot of extra money for working extra hours. In fact, I was saying before that while I was prepping for this little demo today, I got a message from one of the managers that he needed a last minute update to something. And it was like a half hour after I was technically supposed to clock out, but still did it, still put in an hour for overtime. It took me about a half hour to do. And he messaged me a half hour after clock out. So cool.
Sweet.
So Sam, do you want to ask what you want?
Yeah, I guess all those questions that you already asked was was something that I was looking for. So yeah, I'm sorry that I don't have the my picture on it.
No worries.
So I was wondering, I'm actually graduating soon, and I'm really interested in VFX, and I started it last semester in the spring with Shayna, and got a chance to learn how to use Fusion, After Effects, and I already know how to like use Premiere Pro, Audition, Adobe. So I guess my question would be like, what's going to be the good step after, and how to get more into like VFX world, I guess.
What was the learning curve, I guess?
In terms of like actually stepping into a job, or like
stepping into a junior motion graphics?
I will say, if you know how to like push buttons on a keyboard, like they'll help you out. Like obviously if you're graduating, you do have an edge because you are now officially like more or less trained in these programs, and that does look good on your resume, being able to say like, I know how to make things look good. But even it can be intimidating, obviously, stepping from a student environment to a professional environment. I was very, very scared going into my first real job, especially because I had never had a professional experience before. I was just kind of graduated, and then just like had to hope that I was ready to go. And that's more or less it. You have to just trust yourself that you can handle the work comes through, and know that you're never going to be in a situation where they're just going to dump stuff on you and just be like, do it. Even if you can do it, even it's actually really weird in a weird way. Despite like I'd like to think that I'm pretty good at animation and motion graphics. I don't want to toot my own horn too much, but like I was pretty knowledgeable. But when I started, I basically had to relearn all the basics. Not in the sense that I had forgotten them, but in the sense that like the work, like they also are taking a risk in terms of hiring anyone new. So they have to see, okay, where are your capabilities? So they're not going to just throw you in the deep end. If they do, it's not necessarily a sign that that's like a great place to be. But if you are joining like a good team and you have like a boss that you can communicate with, which I'm lucky enough to have, they will slowly build up your workload. Like I'm doing some crazy stuff now that I could never like even thought about managing a year ago. But again, it's not that they just were like, okay, you can do this, right? They recognize that I'm only 2 years out from graduation, that my skill set, while like pretty high, especially for coming out of where I graduated, is pretty good. It's still not, I'm not a senior experienced motion designer. I'm still like, if you look at my official listing, I'm still technically a junior animator. I just have gradually accrued more responsibilities. So that's the big thing, is that trust yourself to be able to like actually be capable of putting out the work, especially, you know, you've taken the classes, so you know, you definitively have proof you can do it. And if you're graduating, like, again, definitive proof you can do it. So trust yourself that you are going to continue your own work ethics. And then when you do get hired, your team and your boss will be there to help you kind of learn the lay of the land. Because that's also another thing, like every work environment is going to be different. I've worked at Verizon for 2 years, but talking with some of my coworkers who are more experienced and have worked at other like design firms or agencies or whatever, they say like, yeah, everyone likes to run things a little bit differently. In fact, I can see it within the company itself. Every department runs differently.
Thank you so much. I do have another question if no one else has. Okay, so I was wondering, how would you like approach at the beginning when you were like applying for jobs around? So like, I know that LinkedIn, it's a huge deal right now. People try to like get connected, you know, message people, like have like Zoom meetings with them. So I was wondering, how was your kind of like journey on that?
This is a good question. Yeah, so LinkedIn, obviously very, very good. Like I said, Brad helped me out in getting my job because it was like a perfect storm of my boss needed like not an emergency fill, but he was like, okay, the holiday season, because I got hired in August, just to give you an idea of how like much prep time goes into the holiday rush. My boss was like, we need someone on the team, like we're expanding, we need someone on the team for the holiday rush in August. So I think he reached out to Brad, who then recommended me. So I guess, you know, being on the good side of your teachers always helps because they do have connections. Despite that, I was like, you know, actively like messaging people, interviewing with people. And if Brad, again, I'm never thankful. I'm very happy with the position I have now, but I am pretty confident that I would have been able to find a job elsewhere if I hadn't had this opportunity. So LinkedIn helps, keeping your connections, keeping contact with your professors, and also, you know, people you meet in college, very, very helpful. I say if there's any alumni events near you, that definitely helped me. I was able to get a lot of connection. And that's actually, I still like, you know, a lot of people I graduated with or graduated before me, I still keep in contact with. Like, you know, not like I talk to them every day, but like I still am friendly enough with them to where I'd be like, hey, how's it going? Like, do you know of any work going on? That definitely goes a long way. Just keeping bridges, you know, they say don't burn bridges, but like you don't have to like be up in everyone's business all the time. Just like, you know, if you have made a good impression on people, that is likely to last. And especially, I will say in this industry specifically, and I think it's going to be attested. My boss described it the other day as incestuous. So the good thing is that if you are able to get your foot in the door and prove that you are a reliable worker, that will go a long way to further employment in the future, because it's not easy to pretend you know what you're doing. But it's people don't like taking risks. So if they know that you are someone that is not a risk, that is someone who is going to be a good worker in the future, they're more likely to follow up or keep you in mind when job opportunities in your ballpark crop up.
Exactly. I mean, I was going to mention that too about the rec when I was approached about it. And I think this is David told his boss to contact me. And it took some thinking, but I mean, you were an obvious choice because of how well you performed in my class, how engaged you'd remained and in contact with me since the class. So there's a lot to be said about maintaining those social networks and just being a consistent, reliable quantity is really important.
I think reliability definitely goes a long way. Like you do not have to be the greatest artist on earth or the greatest animator on earth to find work. Because I think, yes, obviously, like having talent, being good at what you do obviously helps, but I think people are more willing to go with a good worker that is consistent than a great worker who is not consistent, who like drops the ball pretty like every now and then.
Yeah, someone that or at least when I got hired, it was because I didn't know the software at my job very well at first, but I had the foundational knowledge in terms of like in general industry editorial practices. And then my boss saw that, you know, I had the foundational knowledge, the passion, and the willing to learn the craft. And, you know, starting out, they'll train you, you know, get your feet wet with everything that you have to do. And then now I'm 3 years in and I can just go through the entire flow very fast. So it takes lots of practice, but as long as you're willing to put in the work, put in the practice, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah, and Eric's really good to know if you're interested in VFX.
Eric's probably better to know than me.
Well, sort of.
Got a couple years on you.
Yeah. No, Eric's great. Eric's the best.
So I think we
See
should
Ryan.
wrap it up.
Yep. I didn't ramble that much this time.
That's
impressive.
Thank you, Kyle. That's great.
I think I stayed on topic this time.
It was good insight too. I mean, I liked hearing about your job and process of getting it and how you interact with your superiors and brands and stuff like that. That was very informative.
Yeah, it's you know, I'm not doing anything crazy. It's a job. I have my hobbies where I do the more crazy stuff where I have fun, but like I treat this as a job, and not that I like, oh, it's a job. Like I'll work 9 to 5. Like it's a job that I enjoy doing, but it is, you know, more or less straightforward.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of the work. I like to say that because my brother is going to SCAD for animation. And he's really talented. Like I think he's gonna go far, but he learned really quickly that animation is one of the most tedious things you could ever do on the face of the planet.
You'll be a masochist, yeah.
Yep, it is definitive. I say this to a lot of people that are getting into animation, not trying to scare people off, but like just to set your expectations. And actually, you know what? I'll go further. Like post-production, it's very tedious. Yeah, the end result, very cool. A lot of tedium, a lot of downtime, a lot of sitting really long times waiting for things to render, only to find out that a few things are pixels off. Then you got to do the whole thing again. But then when it turns out great, it's awesome.
Adopt that Zen-like patience. It'll serve you well.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.